Hi everyone. I'm live on both YouTube and Instagram TV, and welcome to my studio stream on Thursday afternoons at 3 p.m. Eastern. My name's Rachel Pollock, and I am a theatrical milliner and craftsperson. I live in Durham, North Carolina. The theater I work for is in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, in residence on the campus of UNC-Chapel Hill. And I also teach at that university. So this is my open studio stream where I work on whatever I happen to have in-house on my work table. And this is sort of leftover from last week's stream. Hey, welcome. I see people joining on IGTV and also on YouTube. It's great to have you here. Thank you for joining me. This hat, let me turn it right side up so you can see it. This hat, I sort of talked through the process of working on this. And I should add for you guys on IGTV that you have the portrait orientation and you can actually see the whole work table better if you sign on to the stream on YouTube. So it's up to you. I stream both places and I'm happy to have you in either one. Hey, Arlene is over in IGTV and she's often also on YouTube to get a better view. Things are sometimes like a second delayed on YouTube, so it's 6 of 1, I guess. This hat, I was working on it in the studio stream last week, and I talked through sort of what my process was. This is a type of straw called buntal straw, and it's sold in hat bodies. I have seen buntal hat bodies, but it's trendy right now among fashion milliners, contemporary couture milliners, to buy buntal in mats. So think about like a placemat or a doormat. It's like a flat piece of medium. And buntal mats are woven into these large straw circles, 22, 26 inches in diameter. But the weave of the buntal is very it has a lot of give across the bias of the weave, and so you can get it to take on some pretty extreme forms. So if you think about this, started out as something flat. I won't put it on my head because there's pins in it, but like this is a pretty round domed crown here. And I talked through last week about my progress on this so far, blocking this mat on a hat block, which I actually, do I have that hat block down here? I do. Let me get it so I can show you. Hat block is a positive form of what you're going to shape your hat with. And so this round crown block here, this is my personal block. You can see it's got pins in it, but it still kind of sits on there. This is the shape over which I blocked the crown of this buntal straw hat. And I talked about how I stabilized that perimeter where it sits against your head so it wouldn't just flare back out into flatness. And I talked about how I finished this edge by stitching it and folding it around. This is a nylon brim stabilizing material. It's like a wire, but it's made out of nylon. And I had to seal that cut edge of the buntal straw with a white glue. So in America, it's a brand name would be like Elmer's school glue. But it's pretty common in all cultures across the country that you can, or across the world rather, that you can buy this water-based white glue that dries mostly clear. And is often sold to children because it's non-toxic. Or often sold for children, I guess not to children necessarily. But what I had gotten, the point I had gotten to with this hat in last week's stream, I was being kind of optimistic when I said that I thought I would have completed this task. Hats have a grosgrain ribbon, usually. Sometimes it's made of something else like leather or bias tape. But hats have a band inside that some people call it the sweatband that sits on your forehead and helps keep the hat on your head and helps keep the hat from being stained by makeup the wearer might have on or hair product and stuff. And I last week in this stream had swirled my grosgrain, which means I pressed a little bit of a curve into it, and I had positioned it inside of here. I pinned it into this crown of this hat. And as the stream was ending, I had just threaded up a needle and was like, oh, I'm going to get started on sewing this thing in. Maybe it'll be done by the time I have the next stream so that I can trim this thing out. Well, as has been a theme throughout the course of my open studio streams, often I have grand plans and they do not come to fruition. So I did get some of it stitched in, and some of this is because I have carpal tunnel, so it's hard for me to do repetitive hand sewing for an extended period of time. So I often have to do, a quarter of a grosgrain and then do something else, and then do another quarter. Or I hand this off to an assistant when I'm working at the theater shop, because there's lots of folks who are learning. They're students who are doing some lab hours, or that they learn in an apprenticeship sort of context, and I can say, let me explain to you how to sew this grosgrain into this hat. And they love for the opportunity to work on something that will be a newly created costume item, and I don't exacerbate my carpal tunnel. But I don't have student assistants here in the home studio, so I'm doing this all on my own, and I got half of the way around the perimeter of the hat. So that's just how it goes. And I have a threaded needle here, and my plan is to hopefully stitch the rest of this in during today's stream. And then also, my big plans, in addition to stitching the rest of this grosgrain in, I'm hoping that I'll be able to at least place the trim on it, or some of the trim, because I'm not 100% sold on how, I'm not 100%, I don't want to say sold, because that's like, I'm really sick of how capitalism has infiltrated every element of our expression of I don't buy that, I'm sold on that, etc. I don't need to get sold on my own hat design, but I am not yet committed to the hat trim configuration that I am prepared to pin on here, and then potentially just let it sit in the corner of the studio for a while I decide if that is the trim that I do want to go with. That's a common theme that I've talked about in this stream before. It's a tactic that I use as a milliner in home studios, and also in the context of the theater, where if I'm going to put trim on something, oh, hello, someone else has just joined on IGTV, and I see Arlene says hello in the YouTube chat as well. It's great to see you all. Thank you for joining me in my studio stream. The theme that I come back to with deciding upon hat trim is I'll pin out a configuration, and then I'll put it aside for a while, where at the theater I would put it aside while I go work on one of the other 10 things that are on my list of responsibilities. Here at the house, because a lot of my responsibilities are not craft making right now. Like I make stuff in this studio stream, certainly, but the nature of my work has temporarily changed because of the pandemic, and so it's a lot more clerical stuff and programming and documentation and so forth. So I will pin out the trim. I think this is my goal for today, that I'll get the rest of this stitched in, and then I hope I can pin out the trim and leave it on a head in my studio while I finish the other things that I need to do for the rest of the week. Well, there's only one day left in the week, but still. And come to a kind of either accept that trim as what I want it to be, or I'll come up with alternatives that I might prefer more. Um, Now, in a theatrical context, when I do that, sometimes I'm never the one that is making the final aesthetic decision. That is the costume designer. So often, what I will do is pin out the trim and leave it in the corner of the studio while I do the other things that are on my list to do, um, and decide whether I like it enough, whether I think that the trim configuration I've come up with, if I like it enough to show it to the designer and say, what do you think about this? Or sometimes I will eliminate it before I even show it to the person, because after I've sat there with it next to me for a day or two, I realize, like, oh, this is perhaps too sophisticated for this character, or conversely, maybe this looks a little too naive and innocent for this character, and I don't want to show too much to the costume designer when I'm only one of, any given show. There's 10 other people in the costume shop that have aesthetic questions, decisions that need to be made. And I hate to overwhelm the designer with still more questions about something when I can sort of curate what they need to see and what is, like, maybe a waste of their time and indicative of, at least earlier in my career, it would be indicative of uncertainty about my own aesthetic taste. At this point, I've been doing this long enough that I have a confidence in the choices that I make about those things. But I also see that sort of, because we're a teaching costume shop, and a lot of the people who I'm working alongside are graduate students. Sometimes they have a lot of questions for the costume designer that they perhaps could answer those questions themselves if they had more confidence in their own expertise. But that's the point of the graduate program. One of the things that you learn through it is to develop and trust your own aesthetic expertise, and so you ask less and less questions the more confidence you have in those kinds of things. So I generally like to leave space for those graduate students to maybe ask what would otherwise be too many questions in a professional context. Anyway, I think I'm digressing there. I have some exciting news since last week. I think I mentioned at the end of the stream last week that I had an appointment to get a vaccine, or the first shot of the vaccine, which I did do, and I got the shot on Tuesday, and I didn't have any adverse reaction to it. Like, I didn't develop any headaches or cold symptoms or anything. It did hurt my arm, more so than, like, I get a flu shot every year, and that's just kind of like, yeah, whatever. And this COVID vaccine, I got the Pfizer. Here in North Carolina, they are distributing 3 different vaccines: the Pfizer, the Moderna, and the Johnson & Johnson. And I'm Team Pfizer here. I got the first one of those, and it felt like, if you've ever been punched really hard in the arm by somebody who's quite strong, that is the way that it felt. There was no visible bruise on the outside. My skin was not bruised, but it hurt like that. It hurt like somebody really punched me super hard. Like, I don't know if kids do this anymore, but one of the things that I absolutely hated as a child was when you would go on a road trip with, I didn't have brothers and sisters, but sometimes I would do this with friends, and people would play that game Punch Buggy, where every time they saw a VW bug, first person who saw it would scream Punch Buggy and then punch you really hard in the arm. that was my vaccine experience. Um, that said, I'm super glad to have it, and I'm very excited to go back for my second dose, which happens mid-April. I want to say April 12th, maybe. It's it's a couple weeks away. I want to say 2.5 weeks away. I put it on my calendar and then I promptly forgot about it because when it's closer to time, it'll be more important. But if any of you have gotten the vaccine, I'd love it if you'd comment either in the IGTV chat or the YouTube chat and tell me which one you've gotten. I have one friend who got the Moderna, and she was fine after the first dose, and then she said she felt like she was, you know, just had been like mowed over by her second dose. She was down for the count for a day after that one. And most of my graduate students have gotten the Johnson & Johnson, which is one shot. And so far, none of them have reported any adverse effects from that. I was saying to a friend the other day that I believe the university is distributing a lot of the Johnson & Johnson on site at like student health and the campus hospital and so forth. And I think the reason they've picked that they've prioritized Johnson & Johnson for the university campus is that we've seen that college students can't be trusted not to have frat parties. And well, I don't mean all college students, but that a certain percentage of the campus population is not making responsible choices, and maybe you couldn't necessarily rely upon them to come back to get the second dose, because there's a lot on your mind when you're a student in college, and I think they just thought they would be more successful at immunization of the population with the single shot, and that's my theory. I have absolutely no, I have nothing to back that up other than just my own experience of watching students on my campus have fraternity rush and so forth mid-pandemic. Anyway, today my studio stream is going to end early. I need to stop the stream at 3:45 because I've had a work conflict get put on my calendar, as has happened before in the past. And so I'm going to end this stream 15 minutes early so that I can attend that mandatory meeting. But it's still 45 minutes long. There's a certain amount of studio work that can be observed in that 45 minutes. I'm going pretty fast at this. I'm surprised at my speed on stitching this grosgrain into this buntal hat. Now you might be wondering, like, if you are familiar with sewing grosgrains into hats or sewing trim onto hats at all, if you've worked with any type of straw, particularly straw hat bodies and straw cloth, it can be kind of dicey sewing into straw when it's woven like this, because depending on the brittleness of the straw itself and the sharpness of your needle, sometimes you can splinter that straw, and in the course of sewing into it, you actually wind up damaging your hat and creating a point of weakness that then later on becomes a hole, or becomes a rip or a tear, and that's never a good idea. And it's always a concern in the theater, because I'm torn whenever a script or a designer calls for straw hats, because it's very hard to use genuine straw that has the structural integrity to stand up to the demands of a theatrical run. Um, in part, that is because we as human beings are no longer frequent hat wearers, and so you often have a performer who has perhaps never owned a straw hat or worn one before, um, and they don't really understand how to care for those things in the way that you understand how to care for your own clothing. Um, so I'm always concerned about that splintering of straw and the perforation of a straw hat body. Um, but I will say this for buntal straw. Because of the way that it is constructed, which I talked about in the stream last week, but I will reiterate it here. Buntal fibers are very narrow. I would say they're about the diameter of a cat's whisker, or of a straight pin. And these hat bodies, perhaps all of them, are woven this way. It looks like they are wide, flat pieces of straw, but there's actually a row of each section of the straw. There's 3 fibers, so you have 3 fibers, and then 3 fibers weave over top of it, and then 3 more over top of that, and then 3 more over top of that. So it looks like it's wide, flat straw of the sort that splinters when you are sewing it. But that is an illusion, and so that means there are actually a lot more holes between the straw in the weave that your needle can pass through. So, I sewed this thing with a sewing machine, and if it had been a different type of straw, that would have definitely damaged some of the fibers. But because buntal is so narrow and woven in that 3 and 3 sort of configuration, well, I'm sold. Like, buntal is my new favorite straw for stage hats because the durability, it strikes me as more durable than any other type of straw that I've worked with. And in fact, once I'm done with this hat, which is not for a theatrical purpose at all, this hat is actually probably going to be my new taking a walk in the neighborhood hat. But once I'm done with this hat, I'm interested in, first of all, I'm interested in obtaining some more boring buntal, because I love this sort of optical illusion, white and black houndstooth weirdness that's going on with this hat body. I love it personally, but it is what a mentor of mine would have called a bold choice. It is not it is not a type of pattern that has a broad application. Oh, I see Arlene got the Johnson & Johnson. Lingering soreness in the injection site. Yep. Mm-hmm. Well, so only when you apply pressure, you're luckier than because mine hurt for 2 days, just like I'd been punched in the arm. But to give credit to the nurse who gave me the shot, she said, you should consider which side you sleep on if you sleep on a side and get the shot in the other side. So I avoided that, at least. But to return to my buntal experiment and what I think the next step is, I'm interested in obtaining a buntal mat or hat body that is woven in a more conventional color and pattern. I saw some that were like this black and white one, but they were yellow and white and tan and natural, and then I saw some that were monochromatic, like just a natural straw color, or a sort of a not white, but a bleached bone kind of color. And I'm interested in getting one of those and doing some dye experiments because, from what I understand, buntal fibers, they come from a palm tree in the Philippines, and a plant fiber is dyeable by a number of different classes of dyes. And so I think it would be exciting to get a non-black and white buntal hat body and do some dye experiments. And then I'm also interested in seeing if I could create a bonnet, maybe somewhat similar to the straw braid Regency bonnet that, if you've been in previous streams, I've been working on that for 6 months, and I finally finished it 2 streams ago. And if you haven't been in those past streams with the Regency bonnet, or if you have been and you just would like to remind yourself of that hat and that method and that project, I have a video coming out on my YouTube channel on Monday on how I created that Regency bonnet with recycled straw braid from vintage hats that had been damaged. And it's very succinct, I guess there were probably 6 or 7 of these studio streams in which I was working on it and just sort of talking extemporaneously about spiral straw and Regency bonnets and so forth. And this, I think the video ended up being 6 minutes long. It's very quick, relatively, in terms of an overview on how I made that. But I think I would like to make more bonnets, maybe not the exact same shape, but straw bonnets, because straw bonnets are pretty frequently used in Regency plays and films and anything set in that time period, certainly. And I'd like to use buntal to make those shapes, because I think it would have a nice balance between looking like the natural material that it is on stage and having the kind of structural integrity that you hope that these kinds of things will have to endure the trials of a theatrical play or a film even. I think it's a little easier for things to survive the filming process unless they exist only to get ripped up on film. Just because the way that a film is made is a lot different than a way that a theatrical production unfolds. See, Arlene says, guess which side I sleep on. I guess you sleep on the side that you got the shot on. Maybe. Guess we'll find out. I should address the fact, I feel like there's an elephant in the room here that I just haven't mentioned, and that's the fact that over here, my hat model, which, let me move her over so you can see her on IGTV as well. My hat model, Zelda, you may be wondering why she is wearing a candy pink historical hairstyle here. And yes, she is. She has this lovely pastel pink wig that it's somewhat clownish, but it's also somewhat like, I don't want to say, I'll say colonial lady or late 18th century hairstyle, and it's kind of like the drag version of that, which that's on purpose. I said my Regency bonnet video is coming out on Monday on my YouTube channel, and if you, I put out a channel schedule at the beginning of each month now, and this past month I had planned to release a video Monday, the 29th, I think. I had planned to release a video with the title BioVisor versus Collage. And if you know what either of those things are, BioVisor versus Collage, then you understand the point behind that video. It's sort of a joke, but it's also true. A BioVisor is a personal respiratory device that was developed during the COVID pandemic, and it's kind of like a deep sea diving helmet that straps onto your shoulders and filters both your exhalation and inhalation, circulating through this little bubble of air that's formed around your head, I guess. And a calash is a bonnet that was popular. You see it appear at the end of the 18th century, and most of them were made of cane. I've seen some made of wire as well. And you think about like a horse-drawn carriage and how that buggy cover folds up and folds down, or a perambulator, like a fancy baby carriage. There's that segmented almost awning that comes up to shade the carriage, and or the baby perambulator, and that's kind of what a calash was. It's like these hoops of cane that go around your elaborate hairstyle to protect your head from the elements. Like, let's say you're going to a ball and you have to move from the carriage to the home, and it's raining and you don't want your hair to get messed up. But the hairstyles at that time are so huge that the calash is kind of the same profile as a BioVisor. And so I had this funny idea that I would do a comparison video, because I did buy a BioVisor back when I thought I might have to go in person to campus to teach part of my class or to film some of my videos. And I realized the video's halfway made, but I realized that I can't actually illustrate well what a calash does unless I have the hair. And like my own little short hair, I mean, this is not super short, but I certainly am not going to do a great big Marie Antoinette hairstyle with the hair that I have growing out of my head. And so I realized I needed a wig in order to actually film that and it make the kind of visual sense that I envision it having. So I ordered a couple of wigs, of which this candy pink historical hairstyle here is one of them. But neither one of them was going to be here in enough advance of the release of that video that I decided to just change the schedule of my channel and release BioVisor versus Collage sometime next month. I think it's actually going to be the second or third video in April, and move up my Regency bonnet video. And this was a happy accident because thinking about tie-ins with other things that happen in the universe and so forth, like next Sunday is Easter, which is the time when suddenly everybody cares about bonnets for like one weekend of the world. So I don't regret it hugely that I'll be releasing a bonnet video the week of Easter. Or I guess it's not this Sunday, but it's the following Sunday, right? I don't know. I don't really do Easter. Not really raised religious, so all of that is kind of like not quite Greek to me, but it's not as present in my life as it is in some other folks. And how about that? I have just gotten to the end. I have finished putting my grow right in. I have achieved my goal for my studio stream, and I still have a few minutes to go. It's only 3:33, and my stream is not ending until 3:45. So I'm getting better at time management, I guess, in a stream context. I'm really good at time management when it comes to working on costume pieces for the theater. Like, I have a pretty good idea how long it takes me to finish some things. But I'm not as good at estimating when there's a streaming element involved, because I have to figure into the fact that, like, not only am I paying attention to the stitching that I'm doing, but I'm having conversation with the people who are with you who are watching, and that splitting of attention, I don't always account for that as well as I might. Oh, and I see Arlene is pointing out quite rightly that they often, in this time period of the candy pink hairstyle, that colored hair powder was a popular option, and that's true. I actually saw a really great, I think it was maybe the V&A, one of the historical costume collection museums, put out a really great sort of website activity where you could build your own late 18th century wig and poof different colors of powder onto it, and then save your image and turn that into your user icon on Facebook or whatever. It was quite fun. So actually, since I have gotten to the point where I'm placing my trim on my buntal hat, my newly finished installed grow crane and my buntal hat, I want to, so there was a line of machine stitching that was stabilizing this head size opening. And then I just put in this grow crane, so there's a double line of stitching, one line of hand stitching and one line of machine stitching, which actually, if I hold this up close, you can probably see it now. You couldn't really see it when it was just the one line of machine stitching, but the addition of the hand stitching has really made that pop. And so as I place this headband or this hat band on here, I want to make sure that it rides low enough on the hat to cover that row of stitching. As best as I can, and I think I can do that. This band, at least the way that I envision it happening here, it is not actually going to completely encircle the crown. The goal maybe I could get it to cover that. It doesn't matter because I'm not going to stitch it on totally today anyway. Like I said at the beginning of the stream, I'm really just going to place this and then live with it for a little while and see how I feel about it. I think this is what I'm going to do. So that's my idea. It's fairly simple. It's not an elaborate or ostentatious sort of trim. Well, unless this comes into it. Oh, that's good. This actually might come into it. So let me put it on Zelda here. this would be quite a bold choice, this pink wig and this optical illusion hat. But I'm kind of interested in this little ornament existing in I don't want to, yeah, okay, the crotch of that cross there where it comes down to a V. I'm kind of interested in finishing this thing off and turning that into an ornament that lives on the hat right there. So, well, I have 10 minutes left. I can do that, I think. Have my black silamide hand sewing thread that I absolutely love. I have extolled its virtues numerous times in this stream before. Oh, Arlene's mentioning in YouTube chat the medieval beekeeping mask where you have a wicker plate over the face inside of a hood, and that would also be an exciting or potentially a funny comparison to the biovisor and the calash. The difference, of course, being that I have access to a calash because one of my graduate students made one in millinery class, and I have borrowed it. And I do not have access to the medieval beekeeper's hood, unless, of course, you have one, Arlene. And if you do, I would love to borrow it to create a sequel to this versus video. So this, I'll show you what this is, this ornament here that I'm creating to potentially use on this hat. It started life as basically a parallelogram of fairly wide grosgrain ribbon, and there's a double fold in the middle of it. And sometimes I will take two of these and put them back to back and make what looks like a bow or a butterfly of sorts. And in this case, what I'm doing is folding them up with the long sides to one another and getting this kind of V-shaped flying bird. And I'm going to stabilize this with a few tiny stitches in the back, and maybe I'll pin this. I should probably take this hat off of Zelda's wig here because I don't want to crush it. It's been, I mean, I had it shipped here, and I have another one coming because I wasn't sure that I would like this one. And I'm still not sure that I will use it. It kind of depends on what the other one is as well. But I wanted to make sure that I had a wig that looks reasonably like the hairstyles of the period for that video. It's funny because I used to own a sort of a traditional white Marie Antoinette style wig, which I donated to the theater a few years ago, and thinking if I ever need this, I can just borrow it. Not thinking that a pandemic would make it so that I could not enter the theater for a whole entire year, and that would just happen. It's not that I couldn't ask someone to get it for me and do a handoff. We have a work study who is working down in stock to keep the costume storage organized. And certainly I suppose I could ask that she find my wig, but it's for a funny YouTube video. Like, it's not for class. It's not even for a show. It's not even for a Zoom play. You know, it's the sort of thing that it's like, I need to find another solution than that. Would feel guilty, not wasting her time, but kind of. All right. So now I have this. It's stabilized. It no longer has a little clip on the back of it. And I'm going to pin it in place while this sits around in my studio and aesthetically commune with it by paying very little attention to it. I want this to go right. I'm gonna stab myself, I just know I am. I've set an alarm on Alexa. So that'll go off at some point. It's so hard having an A word in your house, because then if you want to talk about a word, it automatically goes off and thinks you're talking to it. Anyway, here's the new trim. Oh, this is nice. Oh, this is quite nice. I do like that little ornament as well as the band. It's good. We'll see if I still feel the same way about it in next week's stream. I mean, maybe I will have stabilized all this stuff by then, but there's a lot of things to happen between now and then, and likelihood low. We will probably be finishing this in the stream next week. I will say I'm done interviewing. That's not just me. It's a group of people interviewing prospective graduate students. Alexa, stop.
I hate waking up.
Alexa, stop. See, that's the alarm telling me that I need to stop my stream because it is time for me to attend another meeting. Thank you for showing up and visiting with me in the live studio stream today. I do this every Thursday unless it's preempted, and sometimes even when it is preempted, I'll do a short stream like today. From my studio here in Durham, North Carolina. Thanks so much for spending today making some millinery with me this afternoon, and I will see you in a future stream.